Hi guys, welcome back to Spoons and Spirits and part 3 of our series on how to carve a spoon. So in the first part we looked at axing out a spoon and how we use the axes and splitting tools such as a froe, or in my case an old machete, to get that perfect log into a spoon shape. And then part 2 we had a look at carving that spoon shape, that spoon blank, into a spoon, and here we are. So as you can see, still a little rough looking. So this part looks at what's called finishing cuts. Now before we start carving, I just wanted to talk a little bit about finishing cuts, what they're for, why we do them, why they're done with spoons rather than so much other carvings, and that's because I took a long time to come across finishing cuts, and it was only through talking to other spoon carvers that I started to get the gist of what they are and why we need to bother with them. I used to very much be of the mind that it's carved, it's done, it's finished, sorted. Okay then. It looks a bit rough around the edges, and then I started to think, right, well, I wanted my spoons to look smoother, so I tried out sanding. Now in the spoon community, that's a cardinal sin. You don't sand your spoons for one main reason, and that is that when you're sanding wood, it rips it off. It pulls the pores apart. And if you're using a spoon, if pores are open on your wood, it's going to let bacteria and bits of food and moisture into the spoon and lock it in. You don't want that to happen, really. Although we will go through in the next part looking at oiling and finishing and really making it durable, your spoon durable. The best thing you can do is to finish off your spoon with a knife, and that is the part of finishing cuts. So how do we go about them? Now, I've forgive my drawings, but this is the best way I could describe it. So you've done your carving, you've got your spoon, and as you can see, if I'm lining that up there, you can see all these little ridges and bumps there catching the light right in front of me. So it's not smooth. That happens with a knife anyway. A knife is straight, you want to try and create a curve. It's going to be a difficult thing. So the finishing cuts come when the spoon has dried for a few days. When you've got it much drier, you can hear the difference in the wood as you might tap it against other wood. You can hear that difference in it compared to more of a thud of what you'd have if it was a very wet wood still, or very green wood. So you let it dry, and then as you cut it, it reacts differently from when you're cutting it green. You get a much smoother, almost shiny surface on the spoon, and it cuts that little bit finer. So onto my drawings. So at the moment, my spoon roughly looks like this, but I want it to look like this. So the only way of doing it really is to look at those surfaces on your spoon, and now's when you really need to use your eye looking through your spoon. And it can take quite a while sometimes with these finishing cuts. It can take a little bit, just a short quick little turnover of your spoon. It depends how much time you want to place on it, but what you want to be looking for is these ridges, and then you want to cut along the ridge, and then you'll end up with this shape. And then you try again, and you're trying to get these ridges and corners off each time, and eventually you'll end up with that curvature. And that's how you can really get down to a perfect shape on your spoon. That's, of course, if you want it to look like that. A lot of people like that rustic look, that feel of it freshly carved, in which case, great, go for it. But I'd still recommend doing some finishing cuts just to provide that extra shiny, perfect, harder shell to your spoon. So what do we need to do that with? All we need is a sharp knife, and it needs to be sharp, and your spoon knife again. Your spoon knife again. So you can go over the bowl. We're basically going to be going over the whole of the spoon. So I'd certainly recommend, now I strop my knife after every time I use it, but when I do finishing cuts, I give it a quick strop before I start again, just to be on the safe side that it is super sharp. You get a much cleaner cut, and it just saves any hassle and any problems that you're might well come across. So obviously as well, gloves if you've got them. So let's get started to do a few finishing cuts, and hopefully I can get this camera to focus properly so you can really see how it works. Okay then, so what we're looking at then now is we're looking for these ridges along along the spoon, and it might be little bumpy ridges like you might be able to see there on the spoon bowl. It might be longer ridges where we've made the cuts on the spoon handle. And what we're going to do is to start with is just, I'm going to start on these, and you're just providing slow little cuts. You might well, as you can see by the way my knife's going, I'm pulling it in and out like that, and that is a nice slicing motion that will help you keep control of your cut and also provide a nice cut, stronger and more precise cut on your spoon. And that's all we're going to be doing really with the finishing cuts. As I said, there's not a lot really that I can find on the internet, on YouTube or anywhere about finishing cuts, so I thought this would be a nice little video to pop on with it and do something separate for those that are not sure what we mean when we say do your finishing cuts. Now these are incredibly shallow. You're almost grinding off, or not grinding off, but you're just taking the tiniest of slivers off of the spoon. I'm trying to get this camera to focus for you so I can get nice and close, but you are taking the tiniest little amounts off. And yet, like I said, like I showed you in that picture, I'm just looking for the ridges and then flattening them out, cutting out the ridges. You don't need to put hardly any pressure on your cut. It almost moves with it. And some cuts you need to do a tiny bit deeper, and then you just got to go along their edges, slowly moving that ridge along the spoon. But obviously you don't want to go too deep because you will just ruin the look of the spoon. You just got to go with whatever's comfortable for you and whichever way the wood grain's going. For instance, you might see me changing a little bit there because I keep feeling that the wood grain change, I'm going the wrong way. So it's just slowly making adjustments and going back again and again. And like I said, this could take quite a while. It could be really quick. It just depends how much you want to put into it, or how much you go, do you know what, I'm done with this one now. I want to move on to the next. And you could keep going until it is a perfectly rounded spoon, like it's just come off of a production line. You could leave it with that carved feel to it as well, and that carved look. It completely depends on what you want to do. What I will say is, any particularly overly visible lumps and bumps are going to get knocked off and beaten down at some point. Also, don't be afraid of getting every single tiny little visible thing out. You want to get as many as you can do, but when we come to burnishing in the next video, that will flatten everything out a little bit as well. Burnishing involves using something rounded and shiny. In my case, you'll see I use a deer antler. Some people use a pebble from a riverbed that's been smoothed down. Some people just use a PVC tube. As long as it is tough and hard, you can do it, and you'll see how I do that in the next one. But yeah, now I'm just moving on to the bowl, and as you can see, the tiniest little chips are coming off. You can see when they're coming down the side of my knife. I'm just taking the tiniest amounts off. I've got the spoon right in front of the microphone, so hopefully you're getting a lovely sound out of that as well. All I'm doing now as well is I'm feeling with my knife for those ridges as I'm pushing it across. I'm using a thumb push on my knife. I'm just feeling for those ridges as I go and keeping it as straight as I can do. Oh, that was rather a big bit. Okay, and you can hopefully see it's so hard with this camera to get a good focusing there, but it's already, you can see a bit more shine to it where I've cut. It won't focus for you, but you get it when you do it. You will see that you'll just get a bit more of a shine to the wood, almost like you're polishing it with the knife. Right, for the purposes of the video, I will be coming back to this and doing a lot more before the next video, but for the purposes of the video now, I'll just show you a little bit with the bowl. And I'm just using the same knife as I used before, but I'm not really trying to dig in. All I'm doing is just, again, the same as before, sweeping over those ridges, just gently taking it out. And you will feel, just with a couple of days of drying, a difference to the wood. And it's a pleasant difference. And obviously every wood that carves a little bit different anyway, so if you're not using bay like I am, it will feel a bit differently. The more you carve a certain wood, the more you will gain a feel for what it should feel like. Saying that though, however, each part of the tree can feel different depending on what you're carving. If I'm carving a small spoon out of a smaller branch, such as the kayak spoons, which I've done in the past, then it does feel completely different to a spoon such as this that's come out of a fair-sized log. Well, I say log, branch. But again, it will feel different from those cut from tree trunks. I'm not, again, with this spoon knife, I'm barely putting any pressure on it. Just enough to pass through any ridges that I catch. I'm not trying to go deeper. I'm just trying to smooth out what I've got. And that is quite important right now, because hopefully you got the depth that you want in your spoon bowl in the last process, the main carving thing. Now is just prettying it up a bit. See, I can see a ridge right through the middle there, so I'm just slowly taking it down that ridge. It's that little spine that sometimes will sit in the middle of a spoon because you come at it from both sides. Sometimes you can end up with a bit of a spine which is taller than the rest of the spoon, and I've obviously missed a bit. There. There. But that's basically all you're doing. You're reaffirming the lines you've already got, and you are smoothing out the features that you have on your spoon. And that is pretty much finishing cuts. They can almost take longer than the main carving sometimes, because it is one of those things you just keep going back to another thing for, looking at it a little bit more and thinking, oh yeah, I'll just do that bit, or I'll just get that part, or just bring that bit in a little bit. But yeah, that is finishing cuts. there you go. So that is finishing cuts. So I have finished off some more of my cuts on this spoon now, and hopefully you can see a bit of a difference. There are still some ridges, like I said. Don't worry too much about them just yet. Just get them down to as minimal as you possibly can. In the next phase, we'll be looking at burnishing and possibly baking spoons. I think I will bake this one. We'll look at decorational techniques that you could use with your spoon once you've got to this stage. And how to oil or use a butter on your spoon to really bring out the zing in it and to make sure it stands the test of time as well. So yeah, so to recap on what we've done with finishing cuts, once you've got your spoon carved to the main point and it's still green, leave it to dry for a couple of days or one day if it's a small spoon. Then do your finishing cuts. So go over the whole spoon again, slowly taking out all those tiny little ridges that you can find, and with a nice sharp knife. If you're finding it's starting to catch a little bit while you're carving, go back, strop your knife again, and then come back to this. If you need to look at a video on how to sharpen your knives and how to strop, then I will pop a little thingy up in the corner there to link back to one of my previous videos, one of my first videos actually, on sharpening. I will do an update on that soon as well, along with all the other videos I keep promising I'm going to do. So yeah, thank you for joining me for part 3. So hopefully see you back on part 4. Please do hit the like and subscribe buttons and share as much as you can. That'd be fantastic to get as many people as we can into this hobby. Thanks for joining me. Cheers.